struggling widow threatened with losing both land and children, a nightmare no mother should ever face. At dawn, Clara Monroe discovered her husband's death left behind not just grief, but a hidden debt that could cost her everything. When a ruthless rancher set his eyes on her children as collateral, the truth inside a simple locket became her only chance of survival. Stay with me just one more minute, and I will reveal the secret that changed everything. As you listen, I'd love to know, how does this story make you feel? Share your thoughts, and let us know where you're watching from. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss the next tale of hope and courage. Until then, may your day be gentle, and may the light of dawn always find you. The prairie still held the night in its grasp. A veil of mist clung low across the fields, turning the broken fences of Red Hollow's outskirts into silhouettes that looked more like old scars than timber. Frost clung to the dry weeds, glittering faintly where the horizon began to bleed a thin ribbon of crimson. Somewhere beyond that ridge, a rooster crowed. Its voice cracked the silence like a brittle bone, reminding the world that dawn was arriving whether it was wanted or not. Inside the dim farmhouse, Clara Monroe stood by the window, her hand pressed against the cold glass. She was 32, though grief had carved lines into her face that belonged to someone older. Her auburn hair, once neatly pinned, now fell loose in tired strands around her pale cheeks. The widow's dress she wore was simple, dark cotton, its sleeves frayed at the wrists from too many days of labor. Her eyes, gray with flecks of stormy blue, were ringed with shadows of sleepless nights. She had not slept, not since they buried Thomas, not since the debt collector's words had sunk like a nail into her heart. He owed more than he ever told you. Behind her, two small figures stirred on the bed. Emily was the first to wake. 8 years old, her chestnut hair tangled across her forehead, her lips pale with the constant struggle to draw breath. She coughed softly, the sound brittle and sharp, yet in her green eyes burned something fierce. Too old for a child, but born of the will to survive. Beside her lay Samuel, only 5. He was smaller, with round cheeks still touched by innocence. His blonde curls were matted from sleep, and even as his eyes blinked open, his hand sought his mother's like a reflex. He was timid, the kind who shrank from shadows and clung to the comfort of skin and heartbeat. "Ma," Samuel whispered, voice quivering, "do we really have to go?" Clara forced a smile she did not feel. "We do, sweetheart. The farm isn't safe anymore." She turned from the window, her eyes sweeping over the single room that had been their home. The cracked wooden floor, the iron stove where ashes still lingered from last night's fire, the rocking chair where Thomas once read scripture aloud. Ghosts clung to every board. She wanted to reach for them to stay one more day, but survival demanded she move. She crossed to the table. There, tucked beneath a loose plank, she retrieved an envelope yellowed at the corners. Her fingers trembled. She had found it the night before, hidden among her husband's belongings. The ink was faded, but the hand was unmistakable. Thomas Monroe's. She read again, though she already knew the words. "Clara, if you're reading this, then I am gone. Forgive me. I borrowed against the land, thinking I could win it back tenfold. Silas Ward owns the note now. If I fail, he will come for what's his. Protect the children, and keep the locket safe. It will lead you to the dawn we dreamed of." Her breath caught. She folded the letter quickly before Emily could see, but she was too late. The child was already standing at her side, clutching something in her small hand. "Is this what Papa meant?" Emily asked. Clara's heart froze. It was the locket, an old silver pendant with a strange symbol etched on its face, a rising sun half hidden behind ridges that looked like mountains. Clara had not seen it since Thomas tucked it away months ago. "Where did you—" "I found it under the bed," Emily said quickly, defensive. "I wanted to keep it, Ma. He said it was special." Clara hesitated, torn between anger and sorrow. She knelt, her fingers brushing Emily's thin hair back. "You should have told me." "I wanted something of him," Emily whispered, her voice breaking. Clara pulled her into an embrace, her chest aching with the weight of both love and fear. Samuel joined, wrapping his little arms around them both. For a moment, the farmhouse was filled with warmth again, as if Thomas himself were standing over them. Then Rusty barked. The mongrel dog, broad-shouldered, with black and tan fur dulled by dust and age, stood stiff by the open door. His ears pricked, his gaze fixed on the horizon. Clara rose, her pulse quickening. She stepped onto the porch, the wooden boards groaning beneath her boots. The dawn was brighter now, enough to reveal the prairie in its ragged truth. The frost was melting, and the mist thinned, rolling back to expose the far end of the dirt road. There, shapes emerged. Horsemen, at first only their silhouettes, tall in the saddle, shoulders cloaked against the cold, their mounts snorting clouds of steam into the morning air. The sun's edge caught the gleam of a rifle barrel. Clara's stomach dropped. She knew men who rode with such purpose. Not neighbors, not friends. She turned back inside, her voice tight. "Children, pack your things. Now." Emily clutched the locket tighter, her eyes wide. Samuel froze, already trembling. Rusty growled low, hackles rising. The riders advanced, slow but relentless, their hooves pounding like drums across the frozen earth. Clara shut the door and bolted it, though she knew wood would not keep them out. Her heart hammered, louder than the echoing hoofbeats. There was no more time for grief, no more time for hesitation. The past was behind her, and the shadows of dawn had already chosen their shape. The sun had barely lifted when Clara pushed her children forward onto the dirt track that cut through the prairie. Dust swirled in thin golden spirals beneath their boots, rising and falling with every hesitant step. The road ahead stretched endless, its ruts scarred deep by wagon wheels long gone, its silence broken only by the faint crunch of footsteps and the occasional cough from Emily. The wind carried the smell of sagebrush and dry earth, whispering like an unseen companion walking beside them. Rusty trotted close, his tail stiff, his ears flicking back and forth as though he, too, sensed that the morning carried secrets. Clara's hand tightened around Samuel's. The boy had not spoken since leaving the farmhouse, his lips pressed into a small line. Emily walked on the other side, clutching the silver locket tight inside her pocket, her small shoulders squared in a bravery too fragile to last. The horizon shimmered, and then hoofbeats. Clara froze. She turned her head slowly, her stomach tightening, until the shape of a lone rider came into focus. A tall man, broad-shouldered, sat straight in the saddle of a bay horse. The sun caught on his wide-brimmed hat, casting his face in shadow until he drew nearer. Dust rose in lazy curls behind him, announcing his presence like a drum roll. He slowed as he approached, one hand raised in quiet greeting. "Mrs. Monroe." His voice was deep, weathered by years in open air. Clara instinctively stepped in front of her children, her chin lifting, though her heart pounded. The rider dismounted with surprising ease for a man his age. He was perhaps 55, maybe older, but still carried the frame of someone accustomed to work and long rides. His face bore the deep bronze of sun exposure, every line etched like it had been carved by wind. A graying beard roughened his jaw. His clothes were simple, denim shirt faded pale, leather vest scarred, boots coated with travel dust. But his eyes, dark, steady, spoke of a man who had seen enough sorrow to recognize it instantly in another. "I'm Elias Carter," he said, removing his hat with a respectful nod. "An old friend of your husband's." The name struck Clara like a distant bell. Thomas had mentioned a Carter once years ago, in passing, a man he'd ridden with during cattle drives. She wanted to believe the claim, yet trust was a luxury she could not spend so easily. "What do you want?" Her tone was sharper than intended, but fear coated every syllable. "Only to help," Elias replied, his gaze flicking briefly to Emily and Samuel before returning to her. "I heard Thomas passed. Word travels fast out here, and I know who holds your land note." The mention of the debt made her chest tighten. She said nothing, only studied him as the wind carried his words away, like dry leaves. Elias shifted, his hand resting on the saddle horn. "You need to know. There are men who'll come for that farm, men who don't just want the land, but the power that comes with it. Silas Ward among them." The name hung in the air like a storm cloud. Clara's lips pressed tight. She had no wish to speak of Silas, not with her children listening. Emily broke the silence in a way no one expected. She stumbled forward, adjusting the hem of her worn dress. In doing so, the silver locket slipped from her pocket and caught the morning light. It swung gently, its engraved sun and ridge symbol glimmering. Elias's eyes narrowed. "Where did you get that?" His voice was lower now, urgent. He crouched, his weathered hands hovering as if the pendant might burn him. Emily clutched it protectively. "Papa gave it to me." Recognition flashed across Elias's face, stark and undeniable. He inhaled sharply, his jaw tightening. "I've seen that before. Long ago. Men have killed for less than what that carries." Clara's throat went dry. "What do you mean?" Elias rose slowly, his gaze moving to Clara. "It's not just jewelry. That's Thomas's secret, and Ward knows it." The air seemed to thicken. Rusty barked once, sharp and loud, as though echoing the warning. Then, out on the horizon, dust plumes rose, 3 riders side by side, advancing with steady purpose. The lead man sat taller, his frame wrapped in a dark coat despite the warming day. His horse was sleek and black, its stride long and menacing. Even from this distance, the authority of Silas Ward was unmistakable. Clara felt Samuel grip her skirt, his small fingers trembling. Emily tucked the locket deep into her palm, her eyes wide. Elias placed a hand on his saddle horn, his face hardening like weathered stone. "They've found you," he murmured. The sound of hooves grew louder, each beat like a hammer against Clara's ribs. She knew this was only the beginning. The town of Red Hollow stirred as the sun climbed higher, its wooden storefronts catching the pale gold of mid-morning. Dust drifted down the main street, kicked up by passing wagons and the restless shuffle of hooves tied to rails. A cracked church bell chimed the hour, hollow and weary, echoing against the walls of weather-beaten buildings. The air smelled of smoke, horses, and the faint bitterness of stale coffee. Clara walked quickly, her children at her sides, Elias a step behind. The dirt beneath her boots seemed to hum with every anxious beat of her heart. She could feel eyes following them, townsfolk pausing mid-task, whispers fluttering like moths. She kept her chin high, but her grip on Samuel's hand was tight, almost painful. The inn stood at the corner, its wooden sign swinging on rusted chains. Faded paint spelled Ortiz Boarding House. From inside drifted the scent of fresh bread and stew, homely yet strained against the tension of the street. Clara pushed the door open. The light shifted immediately, dim, filtered through thin curtains. Inside, Maybelle Ortiz appeared from behind the counter. She was a stout woman of 58 with a round, warm face and kind brown eyes that carried both welcome and worry. Strands of black and silver hair were pinned beneath a plain kerchief. Her hands, flour-dusted, pressed firmly on the wood as if grounding herself. "Clara Monroe," she said softly, recognition flickering. "Lord above, come, sit. You look like you've been walking with the weight of the prairie on your shoulders." Clara tried to smile. "We just need a moment. Somewhere safe." Maybelle nodded quickly, ushering them toward a table near the back. She set down a jug of water, her hand brushing Emily's cheek gently. "Poor thing, you're pale as milk. And you—" She turned to Samuel, who clung silently to his mother's dress. "You must be brave now. For your mama." For a fleeting moment, Clara's chest loosened, but the relief shattered with the creak of the door. Boots. Heavy. Deliberate. Silas Ward entered like a shadow taking form. He was broad, around 40, his dark coat tailored, his boots polished, as if he had never truly dirtied his hands. His face was lean, handsome in the cruel way of a man who believed the world already belonged to him. Sharp eyes, pale as steel, scanned the room until they landed on Clara. A thin smile tugged his lips. 2 men followed, his hired hands, one tall and wiry with a scar across his jaw, the other stockier, eyes dull, but fists clenched like clubs. The air in the inn thickened. Maybelle stiffened, her hands tightening on the counter. Elias shifted, his body subtly angling between Silas and Clara. Silas's boots rang against the floorboards as he approached, each step measured. He produced a folded piece of parchment, yellowed and official, and slapped it onto the table in front of Clara. "Your late husband," he began, his voice smooth, but edged, was a man of dreams and debts. He signed this note with his own hand. Clara's breath caught. The parchment spread open, black ink signatures, stamped seal, terms that clawed like talons. Silas leaned close. His smile was too calm. "Unless you can pay what he owed, I take the land. And if that doesn't satisfy me—" His cold eyes shifted toward Emily and Samuel. "I take more," Emily gasped, clutching at her pocket where the locket pressed against her palm. "Papa said—" Her small voice wavered. "Papa said the locket would lead us back to the dawn." Clara's heart twisted. She turned sharply to hush her, but Silas's head tilted, interest flashing. "A locket?" Elias stepped forward, his jaw tight. "Ward, this is between you and Thomas. Leave the children out." But Silas ignored him, his focus now hungry, sharp. He straightened, hands clasped behind his back, circling the table like a predator. Clara fought to steady her voice. "You'll get nothing from us but what is written, and you'll not lay a hand on my children." Her defiance was bold, but her hands trembled beneath the table. The walls seemed to close in. The ticking clock, the low creak of the inn's beams, the silence of Maybelle who dared not move. Then chaos slipped in silently. While Clara held Silas's stare, the scar-jawed henchman shifted sideways. His hand darted fast, seizing Samuel's wrist. The boy yelped, stifled by a rough palm. "Samuel!" Clara lurched, but Silas blocked her with an arm, his expression calm, as though this had been part of his theater all along. Samuel's small eyes went wide with terror as the man dragged him toward the back door. Emily cried out, rushing forward, but Elias caught her before she could collide with the thug's bulk. Rusty barked furiously, straining against the air, claws scraping the floor. Clara's scream cut through the inn. "Let him go!" But Samuel's cry was already muffled as the door swung open, a gust of dusty wind swallowing him and the man whole. And Silas Ward, smiling faintly, did not flinch. Night clung stubbornly to the prairie, though a faint band of silver pressed at the horizon, promising dawn. The town of Red Hollow was already behind them. Only the echo of Clara's scream seemed to remain, still vibrating in her chest as she ran, her boots striking hard against the frozen dirt road. Rusty bounded ahead, nose low, growling deep as if the earth itself whispered the path. His paw prints cut sharp in the thin frost. Clara followed blindly, her breath ragged, lungs burning. Every thought collapsed into one name: Samuel. Elias kept pace beside her, his strides long, his coat whipping against the night air. His face was hard, carved deeper by the shifting torchlight they carried. His hand pressed close to the revolver at his hip, but his eyes, dark, weary, carried something more complicated than rage. The prairie opened wide around them, grass bent beneath the wind, shimmering silver beneath the moon. From the far distance came the faint cry of a boy, sharp, fleeting, swallowed quickly by hoofbeats. Clara stumbled, heart seizing at the sound. "They've taken him toward the river," Elias said, voice low but certain. He tilted his head toward Rusty, who barked once, then veered into the open field. Clara ran harder, her throat raw, vision blurring with tears. She could almost see Samuel's small hand reaching back for her, almost feel the tug of his weight clinging to her skirt. "Hold on, my boy. Hold on." The night deepened before it broke. For long moments there was only the crackle of dry grass, the pant of Rusty, the hollow thunder of pursuit. Then a flicker of firelight ahead, torches swaying with the rough movements of riders. Shadows stretched tall, monstrous against the low fog curling near the ground. Elias slowed suddenly, grabbing Clara's arm. "You need to know something." His voice rasped, torn by breath and guilt. "Years ago, I rode for Silas." Clara stopped cold, her eyes snapping to his face. The torchlight caught his lined jaw, the scar along his temple, the quiet shame in his gaze. "I worked his drives, guarded his men, helped him take what wasn't his," Elias confessed, "until I couldn't stomach it. I left, but not before I saw what he truly was." He swallowed, his hand tightening on her sleeve. "I should have spoken sooner. You deserve the truth." Clara's stomach twisted. Rage flared hot, then faltered. There was no time. Samuel's cry tore again through the darkness, higher this time, desperate. "You'll answer for it later," she hissed, pulling free. "Now, help me get my son." Elias nodded once, grim. "Then we don't stop." Rusty barked sharply, tail stiff, ears forward. He lunged into the tall grass, and the chase resumed. The ground sloped down toward water. Clara could hear it now. The rush of a swollen river, swollen from spring thaw. Its voice rose above the wind, urgent, relentless. Torches blazed brighter ahead, and the shape of an old wooden bridge emerged, its timbers slick with dew, sagging but still intact. And there, on the center span, stood Silas Ward. He was a dark figure against the gray dawn, his coat snapping in the wind like a banner of war. One hand clamped Samuel by the arm, holding the boy dangerously close to the edge. The river raged below, black and merciless, swollen waves striking rocks with a roar. Samuel whimpered, his little boots scraping the wood, his free hand reaching out. Clara's breath shattered into sobs. "Let him go, Silas." Silas's pale eyes gleamed even in the dim light. He smiled, cruel and calm. "That locket," he said, his voice steady as stone. "Give it to me, or the boy learns to swim." Emily gasped behind Clara, clutching her pocket where the locket lay hidden. She pressed herself against Elias, who instinctively stepped in front of her. Rusty growled low, teeth bared, his body coiled to spring. The river's spray rose in cold mist, flecking Clara's face. Her whole body trembled, but her voice rose fierce. "You'll have to take it from me." Silas's grip tightened on Samuel, lifting him slightly so that his small shoes dangled over the rushing black water. The boy cried out, the sound splitting the dawn like a blade, and the sun finally broke the horizon. Its first light spilled across the bridge, gilding the edges of Silas's figure, shining off Samuel's terrified face, glinting faintly on the silver chain of the locket hidden in Emily's hand. The moment hung like glass, ready to shatter. The river thundered below, its black water clawing at stone, while dawn broke in trembling streaks of orange across the prairie sky. On the old bridge, everything held in a knife's balance. Samuel dangling in Silas's grasp, Clara's breath caught sharp in her throat, Emily frozen with her small fists clenched, Elias poised like a man who knew how thin the line was between redemption and ruin. Clara raised her trembling hands. "I'll give it to you," she said, her voice breaking against the roar of the current. "Just let my boy live." Silas's eyes glinted, cold and triumphant. "Wise choice." The morning light flickered across his pale features as he extended his free hand, palm open like a demand from fate itself. Behind him, his men shifted uneasily, the smell of wet timber and oil lanterns heavy in the damp air. Clara's fingers brushed her pocket. The chain felt heavier than iron, as if Thomas's ghost weighed on it. For a heartbeat, she imagined surrender, imagined Samuel back in her arms, safe but shadowed forever by the loss of something sacred. Then Elias's hand touched her elbow, a whisper, low, almost drowned by the river. "Trust me, trust her." He nodded toward Emily. Clara turned slightly, and in that instant she saw her daughter differently, not as the frail child who coughed in the night, but as the fire Thomas always said burned inside her. Emily's green eyes shimmered, locked not on Silas, but on the small oil lamp hanging by the bridge rail. A plan flared between them in silence. Clara drew a breath that tasted of smoke and salt. She stepped forward, raising the locket. Its silver face glimmered in the growing dawn. "Here, take it." She held it out with shaking fingers, every muscle taut, praying Silas's greed would blind him. For a moment, it worked. Silas leaned forward, loosening his grip on Samuel just enough, his gaze fixed on the pendant as if it were the sun itself. "Now, Emily," Clara whispered. The girl's arm shot forward, hurling the oil lamp she had snatched from the rail. It spun in the air, glass shattering against the bridge planks. Fire erupted in a sudden bloom, bright and wild, licking toward the boots of Silas's men. They shouted, stumbling back, their torches falling into the river with hissing screams of steam. Samuel twisted in the chaos. Rusty lunged, teeth bared, barking furiously as he drove into the leg of the man who tried to grab the boy. Elias moved swift, dragging Samuel free, pulling him against his chest. Clara surged forward, the locket slipping from her hand in the melee. It struck the wooden planks, snapping open as it rolled. For the first time, its secret was bare in the flames, a folded scrap of parchment, browned and delicate. Clara's eyes widened. A map drawn in Thomas's hand. Her heart cracked with both grief and astonishment. So this was what he meant by dawn, the light to guide us. But before her fingers could reach it, Silas dove low. His hand slammed down, seizing half the brittle parchment as the fire scorched its edge. With a swift, vicious tug, the map tore down its center. "Damn you!" Clara screamed, lunging, but he was already rising, his coat catching sparks, his face twisted with rage and triumph. He clutched the torn fragment against his chest, eyes blazing with promises of return. "You keep your half," Silas snarled. "But know this, gold buried deep runs thicker than blood. I'll be back for the rest." With a sharp whistle, he pulled his men from the smoke. Their boots pounded across the planks, retreating into the dawn, vanishing into the blur of fog and firelight. Clara collapsed to her knees, Samuel wrapping his arms around her neck, sobbing into her shoulder. The boy's heartbeat thundered against her skin. Emily knelt beside them, coughing from the smoke, but smiling faintly, triumphant in her small act of bravery. Elias stamped out the last of the fire, his broad hands dark with soot. He bent down, lifting the half-map that remained. His voice was quiet, roughened. "Thomas left you more than a memory. He left you a way forward." Clara's fingers brushed the torn parchment, her tears glistening in the glow of the dying flames. Hope and dread tangled in her chest. Half a key, half a promise, and the knowledge that Silas would not stop until he claimed the rest. The river roared louder, as if mocking their fragile reprieve. Above, the first full blaze of sun crowned the horizon. But Clara knew the light of dawn was not safety. It was only the beginning of another battle. The prairie felt different after the fire and smoke. The wind carried not only the cold bite of spring, but also the ash of a battle narrowly survived. Clara walked slowly. Samuel held close against her hip, Emily beside her, Elias just behind. Rusty trotted at her heels, his chest heaving but his eyes alert, as if still guarding every step they made back toward Red Hollow. The sky had shifted. Morning had broken fully now, lavender fading into pale gold, clouds burning into soft embers of pink. Each color washed over Clara like a benediction, yet the tightness in her chest did not ease. She felt the torn parchment in her pocket, the half of a map Thomas had left, heavy as stone, fragile as glass. Emily looked up at her mother with steady green eyes, too wise for 8 years. "Papa was right, wasn't he?" she asked. "The locket was meant to lead us." Clara's throat tightened, but she forced her voice into steadiness. "Yes, child. He meant for us to find our way when all else was dark." The town came into view by mid-morning. Red Hollow's main street was already stirring, merchants sweeping dust from their thresholds, children chasing one another with laughter too innocent for the weight hanging over Clara's family. Yet as she entered the street, silence seemed to follow. Heads turned, whispers trailed. The widow returned, not broken, but marked by fire. At the corner stood Maybelle Ortiz, apron dusted with flour, hair pinned but fraying from the rush of morning chores. Her round face softened when she saw the Monroes approach. She hurried forward, wiping her hands on her apron. "Clara, child," Maybelle breathed, her voice a warm balm against the sting of the world. "Lord have mercy, you look like you've wrestled the devil himself." Clara allowed herself a faint smile. "Close enough." Maybelle's eyes fell to Samuel clinging tight, then to Emily's soot-streaked cheeks, then to Elias, his tall frame shadowed by fatigue. "Come inside," she urged. "Rest. Eat. You've carried more than enough for one night." Inside the boarding house, the smell of fresh bread mingled with the faint tang of wood smoke. The room was warm, too warm after the cold dawn, and Clara nearly sagged into the chair Maybelle pulled out for her. Samuel curled against her lap, already dozing, while Emily sat straight-backed, the firelight reflecting in her eyes like two small flames of her own. Rusty flopped near the hearth, his tail thudding once before sleep claimed him. Elias stood by the door, staring at the dust motes swirling in the sunbeam that cut across the floorboards. His shoulders slumped as though some unseen weight pressed down. When he finally spoke, his voice was low but resolute. "I'll stay," he said. Clara looked up, startled. "I've run long enough," Elias continued. His dark eyes met hers, steady now. "I rode for Silas once. I saw what he was, and I left. But leaving didn't undo the damage. If I'm to put anything right, it will be here. I'll see to it that your children grow under guard strong enough to hold back the wolves." His words hung in the warm air. For a long moment, Clara only studied him, the hardened lines of his face, the shame that still lingered, the determination that fought to bury it. Slowly, she nodded. "Then you'll be one of us," she said softly. Emily leaned forward, her small voice cutting through the silence. Papa said something to me before he died. He said, Bin min se soy sang cho con jong qua me con. I didn't understand it then, but I think I do now. Her words settled over the room like the very light spilling through the window, fragile, pure, undeniable. Clara reached across the table, her hand closing over her daughter's. We'll walk that road together. The half map was laid on the table between them, burned edges curled, the ink faded, but clear enough. With Elias's help, they deciphered the marks, coordinates only Thomas could have known. Behind Maybelle's boarding house near the cottonwoods that bent by the creek, they dug into the soil, the air filled with the earthy scent of fresh-turned dirt. At last, Elias's spade struck something solid. A chest, small but bound in iron, emerged from the earth. Clara's hands trembled as they pried it open. Inside, neatly stacked, was coin, enough to pay Silas's debt, enough to buy back peace, at least for now. Tears blurred Clara's vision. She pressed her lips against Samuel's hair, kissed Emily's forehead, and whispered into the wind that carried Thomas's memory. We're safe, love. You've led us true. Rusty barked once, sharp and proud, before Maybelle slipped an old leather collar over his neck, a keepsake from her late husband. Every guardian deserves his mark, she said gently, stroking his head. Emily smiled wide, her small hand resting on Rusty's fur as if crowning him protector of their new life. Evening fell. The prairie sang with crickets. Lanterns lit the windows of Red Hollow, and a hush of peace spread through the town. Clara stood on the porch with her children at her sides, Elias leaning against the post, Maybelle humming inside. The first star pricked the sky. Samuel yawned and pressed against her, Emily tucked beneath her arm. Clara breathed deeply, tasting the promise of calm for the first time in too long. Yet far across the fields, beyond the cottonwoods and the safe glow of lamplight, a shadow lingered. Silas Ward had not vanished. His vow hung in the night air, carried by the wind that rustled through the grass. But for this moment, Clara did not yield to fear. She stepped forward, clasping the hands of her children, her gaze fixed on the horizon where dawn would come again. Light spilled across her face, across their joined silhouettes, painting them in gold, as if heaven itself had promised them another beginning. And so, the widow at dawn stood not broken, but reborn. In the quiet light of dawn, Clara learned that survival is not found in gold or land, but in the courage to rise after loss, the love that binds a family, and the kindness of those who choose to stand with us when the road grows dark. Sometimes the strength to begin again is not born from what we hold in our hands, but from what we carry in our hearts. The hope that even after the longest night, the sun will rise, and so will we. If this story touched you, share where you're watching from. We'd love to hear your voice across the miles. And don't forget to subscribe so you'll never miss the next tale of courage, love, and the light that guides us all.